Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dreadtime Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia. And tonight, dear patients, it's time for me to administer you another round of real horror stories. Tonight's tales all have a common theme. Since my birthday was on Tuesday, I've decided tonight I'll bring you 3 stories of people that had not so happy birthdays. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's tale. Truly Terrifying, Volume 14. When I was 7 years old, my parents decided to throw me a surprise birthday party. They invited my close friends and most of my family. I even got to see my cousin. Unfortunately, I don't get to see her very often because her mom and my mom really don't see eye to eye hardly anymore. But that's a whole nother story for another time. I was happy that I got to see Mila, though. As I was sitting there, greeting all the guests, looking at the mountain of presents sitting in the backyard, I noticed the final surprise that my parents had gotten for me, and I just got a strange feeling. My parents had hired a clown. The guy introduced himself as Uncle Chuckles, and for the most part, his show was very entertaining. He was having the audience laugh. He had plenty of audience-participated magic tricks, and overall, for the hour he performed, it was a good time. Though in the back of my mind, I still had that strange feeling. Finally, when it was time for him to leave, I noticed that he was talking to my cousin Mila a lot, and during the show, come to think of it, he was staring at her a lot. My parents were busy with all the other people at the party, and strangely enough, no one seemed to notice that Uncle Chuckles was actually talking to Mila off to the side of everyone else. So I abandoned my slice of cake and started to walk over in their direction. And as I got closer, I heard Uncle Chuckles say in his thick New York accent, "You know, sweetie, I got another trick I can show you. It'll make you a hit at parties, I promise. But this is an extra special trick, okay? You can't tell nobody that you know how to do this, and we can't let anybody see. You understand, sweetheart?" Yeah, I think I understand. Good, okay. Now listen, when the coast is clear, we're gonna go off to my truck. I got it parked about a block away. This neighborhood's parking is terrible. When we get there, I'm gonna show you how to do this, and then Uncle Chuckles has gotta go on to make some other kids real happy. You understand, sweetheart? Yeah, I understand. Were you excited? You excited to learn how to do this trick? Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. Good. Well then, like I said, we just gotta wait a little bit, and then we'll take off. Does that sound good to you? Before my cousin could answer, I had stepped up. Excuse me, Uncle Chuckles. I'd like to learn how to do this trick too. I mean, after all, it is my birthday. Oh, listen, little man. You've already got so much birthday magic flowing through you right now. If I showed you how to do this trick, you'd literally pop. But maybe some other time, you know? With all due respect, Uncle Chuckles, I don't want my cousin going with you by herself. Oh, come on, kid. We just had an hour's worth of fun. You can't trust your good old Uncle Chuckles. No, I just don't want her going off by herself. Well, look at you, being super smart for a 7-year-old. I know you're thinking right now about the whole stranger danger bit, but look, I'm just your friendly neighborhood Uncle Chuckles. You know me. I know you. So, why don't you go back over there and enjoy the rest of your cake, and I'll be right back with your cousin, I promise. No, I don't think so. Come on, Mila, we're gonna go back over to the table. But I don't want to go. I want to learn how to do this. No, Mila, we're going back to the table. I took her hand and walked her slowly back over to the other side of the party. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I could see the scowl on Uncle Chuckles' face. And it wasn't just, I'm mildly upset. It was a look that if it could kill, 7 would have been as far as I made it on this short little journey we call life. I'm happy to say that once we got back to the table, Mila wasn't too mad at me, and we enjoyed the rest of the party. As for Uncle Chuckles, he walked over to my parents, talked to them for a few minutes, got paid, and left. Just the way that he looked at a 6-year-old girl just didn't sit right with me. And even though I was only 7 years old myself, call it some primal instinct, but I knew that there was something beyond the happy visage of Uncle Chuckles. Something deep below the paint, and something that neither her nor I needed to be alone with. So this is the story about how my 21st birthday became the first and the last time I ever drank at a bar. Let me explain. So I was the youngest of my friends. They were all between the ages of 23 and 25. I had freshly just turned 21. Now, I'll be real honest, I'm a bit of a goody two-shoes, so I had never had alcohol up until the point I had turned 21. I wanted my first beer to be my first legal beer. Judge me if you have to. My friends decided to take me to their local hangout. I don't want to bring any extra attention to the bar, so we'll just call it Don's Bar. So we arrived at Don's, and I told my friends that I didn't want anybody to know it was my birthday. I didn't want it to get out of hand. I've heard plenty of instances of people finding out it's your birthday, and the next thing you know, you're throwing up after 16 shots. I didn't want that to happen. So my friends and I just kind of sat around, drinking beers, enjoying our time. And I'll admit, after about 8 of them, I was pretty tore up, but I was coherent enough to have a conversation. Being a bigger guy has its advantages sometimes. However, at one point I found myself at the table by myself. My friends had all gone off to various parts of the bar, and the next thing I know, this extremely attractive blonde walks up to me and puts another beer down in front of me. She runs her hand across my chest and whispers in my ear, "Happy birthday, big guy." And then, just like that, she walks away. I was extremely confused, and when my friends got back to the table, I got a little upset. "Alright, which one of you buttholes told somebody it was my birthday?" "What are you talking about, dude?" That blonde, the one that's walking right there? You mean the girl that's an absolute 10? Yes, that one. She just came up and wished me a happy birthday. How would she have known unless one of you idiots told her? Dude, listen, nobody said anything, okay? It's a coincidence or something. Maybe she's like one of the managers or something and she saw your ID. Who knows? Yeah, I guess you're right. Look, man, don't let that beer go to waste. Just drink it real quick and we're going to get on out of here. We're going to call it a night. They're going to close in an hour anyway. And I'm telling you, nothing good ever comes from hanging out at a bar at closing time. Oh, okay, fine, I'll drink the beer. Little did I know that was the biggest mistake of my entire life. I tilted the beer back and began to drink it. However, as I got pretty close to the bottom, I felt something sharp cut across my tongue. My eyes instantly snapped open and I spit everything out onto the table, including quite a bit of blood. My friends started freaking out, and the next thing I know, everything went black. I woke up a day later in the hospital. Turns out I had to get stitches on the back of my head where I fell straight backwards onto the floor. And what I had spit up was actually a shard of glass. Someone had put it inside the beer cup. I had to have stitches on my tongue and was unable to talk right for at least a good 3 weeks. The doctors told me that I had done everything right as far as trying to get rid of the glass, and they said if I would have swallowed it, the odds of survival would have basically went right out the window. Word got back to the bar owner about what had happened, and he searched through the entire security tapes and sent various snapshots of the girl to the police. And after a few months of trying to figure out who this girl was, they never did figure it out. This experience has just left me with more questions than answers. Who was this girl? And why in the world did she try to kill me? Was it even on purpose? Did she even know that the shard of glass was in there? Either way, I've never been back to drinking at a bar since, and I barely trust it when one of my asshole friends hands me a drink. And I'll never again take one from a stranger. Dear patients, a short pause before we go into tonight's third and final story. Two really quick things. First and foremost, this last story is actually my own. It's been a while since I've given you guys one of my own horror stories, so I figured it was a little overdue. Also, I wanted to remind you guys that I do have the Dreadtime Stories podcast, where I read the exact same stories over on Spotify in, dare I say, a more data-friendly environment. So, if you ever don't feel like listening to yours truly right here on YouTube, you can slide over to Spotify and hear all these wonderful episodes. With that being said, here's tonight's third and final story. When I was 24 years old, I decided to go bar hopping with a couple of friends. After looking around and trying to decide on which places we wanted to go, we realized that actually the two closest bars to our parents' houses were actually ones that we had never even been to. So we loaded up for the first one, had a few drinks there, got some really good food, and left out for the second bar. The second bar, however, was a totally different experience. This was definitely more of a hole in the wall, and you could tell that all the people in here were regulars, because they were looking at us very strange as we walked in the door. But after they realized that us 20-somethings were just there to drink and chill, they pretty much left us alone after that. Toward the end of the night, I started speaking with this woman named Chelsea. Now, like I said, I was 24 at the time. Chelsea had to be at least in her mid-30s. She just hit it off with us and started talking about random things, and by the end of the night, we had all become pretty well acquainted. At one point, she had looked down at her cell phone, and she kept staring at the screen, like she couldn't believe the message that she was reading. By the time she was done reading, we were telling her that we were getting ready to go home, as it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. She grabbed my hand, and I looked at her stunned, like I didn't expect that. In the back of my mind, I went, oh great, I'm gonna have to let this woman down easy to let her know that, no, I'm not interested. But she asked if she could get a ride home with me. Well, I don't think she realized it was with us, as I was the one that actually drove. I looked at my friends. They were sort of skeptical about it, but we figured safety in numbers, as with her, she would be the fifth riding in my truck. So we asked her where she lived. She said a city about 15 minutes away. So with her house being in close proximity and her seeming not like a threat, we told her sure, we would give her a ride to her place. So she jumped in my truck with all of us and took off. The whole time she was texting back someone, and the look on her face said that she was in some kind of distress. I didn't want to push it because, to be honest, it wasn't any of my business. And back then I was more of a, I don't really need the extra drama kind of person, so I didn't want to engage with any of that. 15 minutes later, we arrived at her house. We dropped her off, she said goodbye, and walked inside. And I figured that was it. So I drove my friends back to their places, and then drove myself back to my parents' house, parked the truck in the driveway, went inside, and went to sleep. I was awoken sometime in the early morning to my mom coming into the living room and trying to get me awake. I looked at her groggily and said, "What?" "I'm sorry, I'm a little hungover, and it's not even 8 a.m. And she goes, "Were you at Paradise Cafe last night?" And I said, "Yeah. Why?" She then turned on the TV and showed me a news story that was being played on the early morning news. Apparently, Paradise Cafe had become an absolute war zone at about 1:30 a.m. A man had entered the bar looking for his girlfriend with a shotgun. He had actually opened fire on a few people who managed to escape out various emergency exits. But then, when the police showed up, he locked himself inside. After a 25-minute standoff, the police were able to get in, and after a brief shootout, the man was fatally shot. I had a sneaking suspicion in the back of my mind. I knew who the so-called girlfriend was. I didn't have any kind of contact information for Chelsea, so I never really knew. The reason I bring this story up now is because actually a few weeks back, I ran into her, and she is now a waitress at our local Olive Garden. She actually told me that I saved her life that night, because apparently the text conversation she was having was her kicking her boyfriend out of her life and basically telling him he had to choose between the drugs he was on or being with her. And this sent him into a tirade that caused him to do what he did and ultimately caused him to lose his life. Well, dear patients, there's 3 stories of some not so happy birthdays. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for listening. Like I always say in closing, check under your bed, look in your closet, and sleep with the light on. The life you save may very well be your own. Good night, everyone.